Our digipreneur is here with us again. We extend, it's birthday celebrations not only for just the day, but I would say the week towards the rest of the year. So again, happy birthday to you, belated birthday, and continued blessings, digipreneur Keron Rose.
Thank you, JW, thank you.
That's right. Well, we looking at our conversation today. I'm considering next year, honestly, a podcast, and I'm thinking this is a great opportunity to put forward some questions as to how one needs to navigate that particular space and ultimately create a successful podcast. So for those looking on, firstly explain what indeed is a podcast for those who probably hear the phrase and hear the term but have no idea what it's all about.
So basically, your podcast is an audio podcast. It's an audio story where you're able to record your voice, and then we could upload it to any of the podcast hosts, which would then distribute those audio files to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and people could tune in from their radios. They can listen to via the app in your headset, but it's an audio experience. You do have people doing video podcasts now, where they record the video portion of it and upload it to platforms like YouTube. But primarily, a podcast is an audio-only experience that allows for passive consumption. People can do other things while they're tuned in and listening to you.
Indeed. How does one monetize a podcast? I mean, obviously, it's based on content, I would imagine, your name, your brand. If you're a big one, people clearly will want to probably tune in to hear what you got to say. But if you're coming in really as a newbie into the podcast space, how does one really ultimately monetize their podcast?
So I'm gonna give you two examples, right? So if you are a newbie and you're starting your podcast, you shouldn't be thinking about monetization out the gate. What you should be thinking about is this element, this medium being an extension of your brand, because chances are people are not going to want to sponsor you if you're brand new out the gate. You don't have the listenership, you don't have the stats. People are not probably going to sponsor you. However, if this is an extension of your brand, right, this is another way to bring in people into your community. And that way, when they're coming in and hearing you for the first time, you probably have some products you're selling or services that you are rendering that can bring in an audience to those other things you're doing. So it's not a direct form of monetization, but it's an indirect form of monetization. So that was one of the things that I focused on when I started out. Now, if you are somebody who has built a community, and I want to use Dr. Terri-Karelle as an example here, because she just hit some milestones and she became the most successful podcast coming out of the Caribbean, right? So when it comes to somebody that has a platform, she was able to get sponsors like MasterCard on board, also Heineken 0.0 on board as well, because she found people that aligned with the mission that she was on within her podcast, and she was able to get those sponsors in. And then also because she created a platform and she built a community, a very large community, and she brought that community along for the journey of when she was building the podcast, that also allowed her to get more people coming in to see her that were not a part of the community before, and that has allowed her to push more sales for the book that she has written, but also get more opportunities to host more events around the world.
When we look at the international podcast template, what topic and subject matter seems to be the most popular? Is it conversations within the realm of religion? Is it inspiration and the upliftment kind of stuff that I'm sure, as you mentioned there with Dr. Terry out of Jamaica? Or is it bacchanal? Because bacchanal to sell. If you come with a podcast that, you're going straight down the middle to create controversy and excitement. What seems to sell the best?
That's actually a very good question. And you know what? Controversy doesn't sell in this regard, right? It's not what people are looking for when they're looking at podcasts. Think about it like this. One of the reasons why podcasting has been able to take away market share from radios is people are trying to get away from the gossip, get away from the politics, get away from the bacchanal, and choose something uplifting. So as of right now, I'm looking at the Apple Podcast charts, and I'm looking at the top 20 for I'm looking at the top 20 podcasts for Trinidad and Tobago right now, right? And we are seeing things like the Joel Osteen podcast, The Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett, Duolingo, which is the Spanish, to learn Spanish, True Crime Stories, Closet Confessions. There it is. Dr. Terri-Karelle reads Redirection with her Redirection podcast, Sleep with Psalms at TD Jakes, and Slay Girls Slay, and Women Evolve with Sarah Jakes Roberts. Those are some of the top podcasts right now in Trinidad and Tobago. So it's not the bacchanal and the drama that sells. People are actually tuning into content that can help them, that can uplift them, that can help them build their mental health, that can teach them new skills. Those are the podcasts that do really well, something that is uplifting and something that people can gain something after listening to your podcast.
You know, and that's great news, food for the soul, because clearly I would imagine people would consume their podcasts while driving, probably in their quiet moments, traveling, headphones on, and you're taking in words that could inspire. So I'm thinking that should be a good template for those looking on. That should probably be the approach, to bring something to the market that could indeed tap in to that sentiment and feeling.
Absolutely. You want to bring something of value because podcasting is the most intimate medium of all content, right? You nailed it when you just said that people are listening to you in their quiet moments. When people are driving to work first thing in the morning, right? They're listening to podcasts again that can uplift. People are listening to you while they get ready. They're in the shower, they're cooking, they're doing laundry. People are not trying to hear drama and bacchanal in their most private moments. When they're working out in the gym, their headphones are on. They want something that can uplift them. Even with my own podcast, Digipreneur FM, one of the biggest compliments I get is people say, yo, they listen to my business podcast throughout the entire day while they're at work to help them, motivate them to go start a business, to leave their 9 to 5, you know? So people want to be uplifted, and if you really do want to succeed in the podcast game, you want to bring to the market something of value, and you also want to have an angle. Don't just take a typical angle. You want to be able to create an angle with your podcast. And that's really what pushes your podcast. So for Dr. Terri-Karelle Reid, her podcast is Redirection. She finds normal, everyday people, and she lets them tell their stories. And she goes through that whole process of their downfall and what was that defining moment that helped them to change their lives around. For my podcast, Digipreneur FM, everything is all about digital entrepreneurship in the Caribbean, doing it from the Caribbean's perspective. So there's an angle there. So to really have a successful podcast, you want to ensure that you have an angle that you can really lean into.
So let's break it down now to dollars and cents. Again, not so much the financial possibilities, but the actual startup package, as it were. If I'm on a shoestring budget, tell me what equipment I need, what do I need to literally get the ball rolling to start the podcast, from microphone, laptop? Just walk me through it, and probably a cost.
Yeah, no problem. So podcasting is also the cheapest medium to start creating content for, because at a bare minimum, the only thing you need is your phone and your headphones. It could be earpods, it could be the headsets that jack into the phone with the mic. At a bare minimum, that's all you need. And you need your phone to use the audio recording app, and you would just record the audio and upload the audio files into a podcast host, right? The podcast hosts, all the podcast hosts start at there's a free version of the account with some limitations, but at least you can get started. So to start, you could use your phone, your headset, and the free version of the plan. Now, what I would recommend to everybody is, remember, and Jason, you've been in the music industry for a while, you know that when your audio is not good, if somebody is listening to you on the headphones and your music not sounding good, the audio is not good, they're gonna turn it off. So even though you could start with just your headphones or earpods, you need to ensure that the quality is at least it's listenable. I can't figure out the word, but you can because if it's bad, if the audio is bad, people are just going to turn it off, right?
Yeah.
But if you do want to step your game up, what I would definitely recommend is going onto eBay or Amazon and looking for a dynamic microphone, they can start at low as $30, right? A dynamic microphone, because what you have is a lot of people buy Yeti microphones and they're omnidirectional. So they're picking up the voices and sounds from everywhere around the room. With a dynamic microphone, the voice audio, it's only picking up that one direction, the voice right in front, and filtering out all the rest of the background noise. So that way, when the dogs are barking, the roosters are crowing, and everything else is happening around you, you know, you're still getting a good quality of your voice. So it can start as low as $30 for a microphone, and then you're looking for a dynamic microphone. And that's really all you need to start the podcast.
In a time where people's attention span seems to be really short, what is your recommendation as to the ideal time frame, you know, duration of a podcast, start to finish, that it could be inspirational, on point, and it could keep the audience wanting and longing for more?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question, because I say this all the time. People only have bad attention, short attention spans to bad content. Because we sit in a 3-hour movie, no problem. If it's good, we're sitting there watching it. We binge on Netflix, hours, right? So people don't have short attention spans. They only have short attention spans to bad content. Now, with regards to podcasting, right? I have the stats in front of me. So 32% of the podcasts that are listened to are between 20 to 40 minutes. 21% of podcasts are between 40 to 60 minutes. And in third place, 16% of podcasts are over 60 minutes. So half of the podcasts that people listen to are between 20 minutes and 60 minutes. And I mean, that's perfect, because you got to think about it, right? Podcasts also have the highest consumption rate of all content at over 85%, because people press play, then they go work out. They press play, they go get ready. They press play, they go take that 1-hour drive to work. You're keeping them company in traffic. So you want to have a podcast anywhere between 20 to 60 minutes if you really want to have a successful podcast.
Keron, again, I'll give you a chance to put in your closing remarks, and thanks again for the great advice today as it pertains to starting and being able to make a successful podcast. You have the final say.
Yeah, so thank you for that. So I want you guys to know that, you know, podcasting is a medium that is really blowing up. People across the region are consuming podcasts at a high rate. We don't have a lot of high quality podcasts coming out to the Caribbean. However, our consumption of podcasts are really high. And just so you guys have an idea as to what success looks like, I'm just going to read some of the milestones that Terry just knocked out the park, so you guys can understand what is achievable and why this podcast is gaining international recognition. So 37 episodes. She has over 4.9 ratings of over 300 people reviewing the podcast. It's listened to in over 107 countries with over 104,000 downloads and over 128,000 downloads on YouTube, and is currently in the top 5 percentile of all podcasts. This is somebody doing it from the Caribbean. So you can make an amazing podcast from the Caribbean if you put in the work. Go check out Redirection and look at the blueprint of how she did it. And we need to see more Caribbean podcasts coming out of the region. And when we look at the Apple podcast charts, we want to see Caribbean podcasts. Terry's been able to rank in over 26 podcast charts around the world. We need to see more Caribbean podcasts. So that's my clarion call to everybody thinking about podcasting.
Keron Rose, thanks again. All the best and compliments of the season. Hopefully we'll get a chance to touch base next week.
No problem. Thanks again for having me. Take care.
Entrepreneur Keron Rose with us on this beautiful Tuesday. Up next, Health Plus with Dr. Sophia Mohammed, TNT's favorite doc. She's in the building with scrubs. Wearing the scrubs this morning. She's ready for action. Health Plus.